Kazumi, when did you first realize you could turn your life into a business? Was it a slow awakening or a single transaction that changed how you saw yourself?
So I got into specifically OnlyFans during COVID. But before that, I was a marketing executive in a pyramid scheme. And before that, I went to film school. And before that, I was always like a kind of like a prolific sex party fiend. So I was already really comfortable having sex in front of people, being really like, just outwardly like promiscuous and naked and never really caring about people's opinion. So
Mm.
I felt like during COVID, I was kind of like, in a fork between two roads where I was like, my life needs to change. I'm not really happy with like what my life looks like right now. I want something remote and residual. And I had already done like so many horny little photo shoots on my own personal Instagram. So people were already kind of asking me for an OnlyFans. And because my circle of friends was from the sex party world, like becoming a sex worker was never like a huge like step for me socially. Like when I made an OnlyFans, people were just kind of like, yeah, like she totally should have done that like a year ago. So I feel like it wasn't necessarily like an overnight thing, but I always tell people like I feel like I was born for porn. It felt like something very natural. It never felt like something I had to force or misalign or even had to continually negotiate with myself with. I felt like when I decided to do it, I felt like, fuck, I should have done this like a year ago.
Yeah. And did you slowly ease your, like, did you start with like bikini photos and then ease into full porn, or was it kind of full blown from the beginning?
So the first year of having an OnlyFans, I didn't have any social media. I was primarily like marketing myself via Telegram, where I would, buy coaching courses or mentorship classes from other bigger OnlyFans girls and buy like promo from them. So the type of content I had was almost always really horny. I don't know. I didn't know at the time that I could just wear a bikini and like make money. In hindsight, I probably would make a lot more money if I was just like one of those like implied girls, like one of those
Yeah.
influencers who just never showed anything. But it's funny, like when I talk to other porn stars, it's like I feel like I physically can't
Yeah.
clean it up. Like I just like
Yeah. Yeah, like you started without social media. So even though you were able to like grow so big on social media, it's like what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Like those girls that are implied, they do make the most money, but it's because they have like such a massive social media beforehand. What did you have that or it was always no, yeah, it was always kind of this.
absolutely not. I did not have any big socials at all. I didn't have an Instagram, I didn't have a Twitter. I had like my obviously my personal social media, but I also wasn't very conventionally attractive where I felt like if I just posted a bikini picture it would or like a TikTok it would convert people into paying subscribers. Like I knew for someone like me at the time I personally had to have like a story to tell and like kind of think of like guerrilla styles of marketing that made people have conversations and discussions about me regardless of like if they even thought I was someone I would want to like jerk off to at the time.
So a lot of like porn stars and sex workers obviously go by aliases. Do you think of Kazumi as like, other than yourself, a character, a product? How do you see her, or is it just already enmeshed?
It's really funny because sometimes I'll talk to like people, especially like guys, and they'll be like, I don't know who the real you is, like if Kazumi is this or whatever. And I'm always like, that Kazumi is just a stage name for my own privacy and discretion, but
Hmm.
Kazumi is not necessarily a caricature of like who I am. It's just, that's the role I'm playing, but it's an extension of myself. Pet peeve I have is when people say things like, that wasn't me, or like, oh, I don't know who that was. But it's like all of these things are parts of me and I celebrate them. Obviously, for the purposes of like whatever it is, whether it's to be more sexual or be more intelligent or be more funny, I'm going to promote those aspects of myself more versus then when it's not being called for.
I think you kind of already answered this, but if your name is like is literally a company, is trademarked like some people's are, is LLC corporation, what happens to the person underneath that when they evolve?
Yeah, it's interesting when like I was thinking about the name of your podcast being the commodification of self and how much of ourselves are we selling before we become a sellout. And
Mhm.
I was talking to my friend, what's important to me is like kind of holding on to the same values I had
Mhm.
and things that are important to me in terms of like the way I treat people or the way I view money or the way I view sex and relationships to make sure that that is something I stay true to myself from when I first started to now. It's important for me to look in the mirror and not continually negotiate with myself. And, obviously I'm from Los Angeles. I've seen a lot of people, get into entertainment or make it big and suddenly, over the course of like compromising their own values, in a few years, like all the things that make them are no longer them. So I think, sorry, could you repeat the question? I was wrapping it up.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. If your name is what happens when the person underneath evolves?
it becomes a continual extension of myself. Like I feel like I've evolved continually throughout my career. I don't know if you're super familiar with my lore, but the first few years of my thing, I was always trying to go viral. I was much louder, I was much more obnoxious, but I was also in my early 20s, and now I'm like nearing 30. I'm a lot more mature, I'm a lot more quiet, and I feel like it's been cool to see like my audience base also grow up. And so those people have evolved with me and kind of matured, and the ones that have really liked me for me, which granted isn't everyone, which is fine,
Yeah.
have really seen someone grow up in front of them. Like I'm from the LA scene, so people, that I've seen at parties always come up to me and be like, "Wow, you've changed a lot." And even if I don't recognize who you are now, it's so cool to see like the person you're becoming.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And that makes a lot of sense, like your audience growing up with you. And so like on Graham, I think I watched you were talking about how your career, you treat it like a startup. So how is Kazumi Incorporated, even if that's not the name, structured now? Like do you take a salary or is everything reinvested still into the brand?
So, what's funny is that my LLC was called Kazumi Squirts LLC because I just did not know it'd be that big of a deal when I made it. I
Yes.
have a DB,
DBA.
DBA, but no one uses it or cares. But it is structured as an S corp. I put myself under a salary payroll, and then the rest of it, I would say, like honestly, my overhead is a lot larger than people recognize because, of course, like right now, I'm part of an OnlyFans agency, so I give them a percentage. But I'm also one of those people that do a lot of like weird ventures. Like I've done the Kazumi's University thing, which has its own like set of employees,
Yeah.
and obviously. The goal, I've put my money in some investments in some startups, but right now, I feel like this year specifically, it was a lot more on my own personal growth, which is shorthand for just traveling and fucking off. But I do aim to kind of like make smarter investments in the future
Hmm.
because what I really want to do is I just want to transition a little bit away from entertainment so that way I felt like every time I would want to venture into like mainstream media or like crypto, which is what I'm trying to do right now, my OnlyFans would obviously suffer because I was giving it less attention. And when I give it less attention, all the things that I want to do also can't happen because that's how I pay for things. So I'm looking to use the money I'm making to leverage myself into different things before it's too late. I feel like right now OnlyFans is up, but I don't want to wait until there's a time where it isn't, and I'm just like, fuck, my income and lifestyle is compromised.
And when you say like investing back into the business, like I remember you would do like billboards and stunts, like public stunts like that. Do you still do things like that, or was that in the beginning more?
I feel like, virality is one of those things that kind of like plateau in a way. Like it's at a point, it's kind of like, do people already know me? And that was the point of going viral. The second step after that is sustaining your audience and making sure that people are continually talking about you, but not in a way that makes them tired to talk about you. You have to continually add new depths of who you are to the audience. So I haven't done like things of that nature, but what I have done is I've continually, yeah, as you said, like evolved into different things. Last year I evolved into like, I did like a food collab with a burger joint, and then I did like a weed collab. So it's like now I'm like outreaching to different audiences, and I'm still con having the same style of like not necessarily being viral, but kind of being off the wall, being a little bit more creative with my marketing. And so that part of me is consistent, even though I'm not necessarily like dancing like a monkey like I used to.
Yeah. And when you are entering these new spaces of brands and like a food channel, for example, or like food business, et cetera, like what, if any, discrimination have you felt as a sex worker from working with brands outside of sex work?
I wouldn't say it's discrimination. I would just say it's like I understand I'm a brand risk to a lot of people. There's a saying I have, why can't sluts change the world? I feel like what's important for me is continually pioneering to other people like me who are possibly not as privileged in terms of how they look or how much money they make, and making sure that we know that it's possible to continually destroy the glass ceiling. Like, I definitely get a lot more no's than yeses, but it's really about not necessarily more so because of me doing form, but because I'm not saying the right story to the right person. I feel like for the most part, people see what's happening right now as a sexual revolution in a way that we are becoming rebellious and kind of becoming more autonomous with how we create content and kind of own ourselves and our own brand image. And when we continually prove and show that like someone like me who's gone gangbang, pissed on, and just done a lot of things that aren't worthy of respect to the mainstream like world, it shows a lot of people that, like what is respect truly based on? Is it based on admiration or is it based off of like, just realizing that we're people that, do normal things and should be able to have a life outside of porn. Like life continues on and we're able to continually do other things like walk through fashion shows or be in music videos or model and etc.
Yeah, I really like that question you pose. Like, what is respect even based on? Like, what constitutes like a respect thing? And working with clients, I've even felt like discrimination secondhand. I'm not a sex worker and never have been, but from my clients, I see, for example, like I think it was a program like Jubilee or Cut or something that they wanted a client. And that client became unavailable, and I was like, oh, then here's some other people. They were just as big, but they felt that because that person had already kind of been accepted into the mainstream, they weren't willing to take a risk on like this other type of sex worker. And I'm like, they have the same they have the same like level of porn out. It's just that you don't really want to take a risk, or it's like this type of sex worker is okay, but not this one. Like this one that has been doing thirst traps or like more brand unsafe things, and this one is already accepted. Like, what is so wrong about being the first one to accept this type of client? I've found it a strange experience of like what constitutes like an okay sex worker to enter the mainstream.
Absolutely. Like I will say like a big radar for me, especially like when dating with men, is kind of realizing like, okay, do they respect me because I'm like obviously a really successful sex worker? It's easy to respect
Right.
someone like me.
Right.
Or is it because I just respect people in general? Like, would this person have respected me like pre-surgery when I was selling maybe pussy for $200? Like respect should not necessarily be unconditional, but respect for me is just kind of like being able to realize and understand that people make different choices in their lives, and regardless of what it is, if they're not hurting other people, they deserve respect. And for me, like especially with sex work, there's definitely like a hierarchy of people of who people respect, whether it be from like people like me who are online sex workers part of the bourgeoisie, streetwalkers, on Figaro. We all deserve respect regardless, and we all at most importantly respect.
When dating, obviously, you seem like you've always treated sex work as a business and taken it really, really seriously and conveyed that well, or articulated that well. But in terms of like your actual success, monetary success, when dating, have you found that person, a man or whoever you're dating, respects you more just because you are monetarily successful versus when maybe you were just starting out? Like, do you see that moment in somebody's head where they're like, oh, yeah, she's a porn star, but like she makes a ton more money than me, so then I can respect her?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I feel like, I mean, honestly, I would say I don't really have a problem dating because of like the pornography thing. I would, or even like before that, I was always like into E&M, ethical non-monogamy. So I always practiced like open style communications with every relationship I've had in my adult life. But I will say maybe the big struggle I have is just kind of like the financial dynamic between me and my partner, especially, with the fact that I'm so public facing. I feel like, maybe a lot of guys might not have a problem with their girlfriend being a stripper or being like even an escort. But the fact that like, you can probably Google like your girlfriend getting gangbanged maybe is a little bit more of like a negotiation that they have with themselves because obviously like, the people, especially the internet, don't actually believe people like me deserve love or a happy ending. They want to, in a weird way, see consequences for our actions, and they don't really understand why they want us to suffer in this way. I've definitely had partners that I feel like the negotiation to themselves was signed off because I made a lot more money. But at the same time, I also feel like the dynamic as someone who's typically the breadwinner in a lot of my dynamics, it's kind of like I'm a lot more sensitive about making sure that I feel feminine
Yeah.
at the end of the day.
Yeah, there's like memes where it's like you slip the card under the table so they can pay for it, but really,
Yeah. That was me and my last partner, and he was amazing. But I just feel like, especially a lot of sex workers I know, they have like suitcase pimps. I don't know if you know the term, but like it's just a boyfriend who makes no money and just kind of like lives off their girlfriend who's a sex worker. And in a way, for me, it's just kind of like there has to be more.
yeah, they have to be ambitious too.
Yes, but it's also just kind of like, I had this like a pain and anguish with a friend of mine the other day where I was like, I wonder if like my type doesn't exist in my tax bracket right now because I'm 28 and I like, typically like people around my age range, but I find people my age range are typically kind of weird or might have like some type of dynamic that's makes them feel weird about a girl outwardly having a lot of sex with other people, number one, and number two, like outwardly making a lot of money and not necessarily wanting to take care of everything like they used to.
How do you decide like who gets to touch the brand of Kazumi legally, visually, emotionally?
mean, first year or two, it's kind of like whatever comes, right? You're taking every opportunity because you don't know which opportunity is actually an opportunity. So I felt like I was doing maybe like two podcasts a day. Like I would do like collabs, like porn collabs, like every other day. Like I would, my days would start really, really early, and I would, all of these pretty much almost always be for free for exchange for exposure. Like I would do streams, I would do YouTubes. I was just taking any and every opportunity back then. Now that I would say like I paid my dues, I guess. I feel like I'm a lot more picky with who Kazumi touches because, like I said earlier, like I don't want to negotiate with myself too much. Like for me personally, I don't feel any need to go on a red pill podcast and be humiliated. Like, but I totally understand when and why girls do that. My one of my first few things I went viral for was over that no jumper 50 guy gangbang. So when I see people like debate over Bonnie Blue and Lily Phillips, I'm like, look, it's all storytelling. The art of seduction is unpredictability, where you're creating this viral moment and then afterwards it's up to them to sustain it. And then afterwards they could do whatever. Like I would say most people don't even remember I did that. But what's important is the person I am today when people and the opportunities that arose from it, which is creating a podcast circuit and being able to like kind of like circulate. The type of people that and businesses that I kind of let Kazumi touch now are just much more aligned with who I am and what I really like. I would say they're much less focused on like, okay, I want exposure, or I want to make money, and more so like, okay, this is like truly something that ignites me, that inspires me.
Can you touch a little bit on like New York Fashion Week? Did people approach you? Did you approach brands? And like, how did that come to be?
So I really, really, obviously, my hat's off to Mia Khalifa and Lana Rhoades. I think they're pioneers in this space. I don't know what our industry would look like without them. I do feel like, for a lot of us, especially when we want to be taken seriously in other industries, a lot of us may feel the pressure to kind of not necessarily turn our back on our industries. Obviously, their experience is their experience, and maybe it actually was negative. But I feel like there seems to be like somewhat of like a separation of self, where you're like, I am no longer that person. I want to make sure that I'm no longer known as that person, almost forget that person. And for me, like part of my story and maybe my competitive edge is that I am a sex worker. And honestly, if you don't want to fuck with that, honestly, kick rocks because there's someone that will, and I'm a lot more like confident in that as we're like kind of approaching this like age of more sexual like acceptance. So when I went into New York Fashion Week, I wanted to make sure when I was talking to brands that what was important to me was that I didn't let that part of me go. Like part of me is that I am a sex worker and not just a sex worker. I'm an active porn star. I still take shoots regularly. That's how I make my income right now from pornography, not necessarily bikini pictures, not campaigns, not photo shoots. It's from having sex on camera with people. And I feel like, sex work is inherently rebellious, and so is fashion. Fashion is a statement. It tells you who someone is in our society. It tells you a story. And just like pornography, it's part of storytelling. So when I went into New York Fashion Week, like it was, first of all, I didn't know it was that expensive to like, just like create a splash, both PR wise, both getting fitted and just both doing anything in New York for New York Fashion Week, but it was such a cool experience to be like, wow, I feel like I'm breaking barriers. And when I walked for the first time for Anna Bolena, it was incredible because, like one of those like pictures on like the wall of like the little model sheets was a picture that I grabbed from one of my porn photo shoots. And for me, like I always thought like I had a lot of my dreams have been closed off because of pornography. I've always, been into film, I've always been into modeling. And I felt like a lot of that mainstream stuff would no longer, I had to say goodbye to it because of, the choices I made with doing porn, especially the way I do it, which is hardcore. And it was just so fucking cool to be like, they fuck with it.
Yeah.
And not only that, it's there. And now I closed that fashion show. And it was one of the most full circle experiences in my life. Like I used to watch America's Next Top Model and practice the poses and just like wish like one day I was one of those girls. And I'd always tell myself excuses like I'm too short, I'm not white, or I'm not conventionally attractive. And here I am. It was because of Kazumi, because I decided to do porn, not because of an inverse of it. Yeah.
Exactly. I always tell people that are like, sometimes they have these loose dreams of like basically just wanting to be famous, being an actor, being a model, like whatever. And I'm like, you'll actually get there so much like further and easier if you work on your own audience and your own personal brand. And you'll get there in ways that you didn't think you would, instead of just hitting the ground doing audition tape after audition tape. You're more likely to be just like cast on the spot as Kazumi. I think the first of the kind to be a part of New York Fashion Week while remaining active in porn. And that has been like the philosophy of my company, and like my ultimate goal is like for porn stars to not have to quit porn and still be able to straddle the mainstream, because the porn stars and sex workers that make it into the mainstream, they may be conventionally attractive, they may be like hyper successful, but I think that them being in front of the camera and shown to like real audiences, middle America, is doing more for that streetwalker, that person that society is like respecting, or and it or at least is sparking debate and conversation so that we can have a more safe world for sex workers. So amazing that you are straddling both worlds. I love that you said like fashion and porn are not all that different. They're about storytelling. So yeah.
And absolutely, like everything we consume is sex. Like it's like what if we think about it, like what is Cardi B singing, or like what is like Sexy Red wearing? It's like, oh, or like well, like how do we even sell like a burger? It's like all of it is, like whatever Sydney Sweeney is doing, it's all it is selling sex. It's selling sex appeal. The only thing I'm selling is kind of just the entertainment aspect. And what's really interesting too is like if you really talk to someone who's anti-porn, and maybe they say like, okay, like we can't tell if this is ethically created, then we could talk about OnlyFans, which is like obviously created straight from the tap from people like me. And then there's an issue with that. You go deeper and deeper and you realize it's not more so like a pornography issue. It's more so people having an issue with themselves and the way that they view their own bodies, or feel like they have to compete with one another, and feel like threatened by like the radical acceptance of our bodies and how we express ourselves.
Yeah, and like in a capitalistic society, everyone is selling a part of themselves, like a body part, you know. Contractors like sell their hands, writers sell their hands and their brain. Like porn stars are also selling another part of their body. Sex workers are also selling a part of their body. It just so happens to be different. Do you agree with that? Like it just so happens to be different, or do
Yeah,
you think a
absolutely.
distinction?
Like I remember I was having the strangest debate with this guy, and he was like, you're basically like, you're tricking, you're like a hooker. And I was like, well, I don't want to say I am a hooker because honestly, it's I'm not.
Yeah.
And also like their battles and my battles are completely different. And to say it's even remotely similar, even though we both sell sex, is almost a disservice to them and also a disservice to me. Like, and they were kind of trying to break it down. They were like, well, look, you have sex and then you get paid. And I was like, okay, so I create a product and then I get paid. So it's the same thing as like that cashier who is selling their time and then they're getting paid. Or if it's a painter and they paint something and they get paid. It's like there is no, like, and then at that point where I guess we're all sex workers, if we really think about it, we're all creating an exchange for value and goods for the means of
Yeah.
production. Not that
Yeah,
much.
and for even further than just like, a construction worker selling their body, it's like for me as like a businesswoman, like I think the girl boss era, thank God, is like thinning out. But when we were in that era, the Sophia Amoruso, it was like make yourself uglier and gnarlier for the man. Like I'm just now at a point in my career where I'm like, no, I am gonna like go out to dinner and push my boobs up if it means that I can land a deal. Like, so I am selling sex as well.
It's great for me, like when I was going back to do what I was saying with like fashion being rebellion. Like I remember I would go to a lot of like nudist resorts, nudist colonies, and sometimes you do wear clothes. And since it's so optional, like I would always wear something extremely slutty. Like I'd be a schoolgirl, or I'd be like in lingerie, and I feel like naturally, even if there isn't men around, I'm still dressing slutty. Maybe I'm even dressing sluttier. Especially dressing and seeming super feminine feels rebellious in a world that feels like people like me are probably stupid or like not worthy of respect. Like if you don't respect me because my tits are out and I have no panties on and I have pleasers on, it's like where's the line where you start deciding that this person doesn't deserve just as much respect as the other person? And
Mhm.
who calls the shots and why do we honor those shots?
I like that you said it feels rebellious to dress slutty and still be smart and like unapologetic about that. And then with Fashion Week too, a lot of fashion brands like Balenciaga and more, they use latex, they use BDSM wear. Do you feel in any way that that's like appropriation using sex worker aesthetics, or are you fine with it?
I think it's cultural appreciation. For me, like it's kind of what do we want? We want more representation, right? It's like, okay, like did I think the Nora movie was awesome? No, I thought it was whatever. I do like is just seeing like more stories of us just being,
Yeah.
and not having necessarily to prove ourselves or having a deeper like umbrella agenda over everyone else. Like for me, it's introductory, right? Like if I'm someone who sees that Nike like latex Adidas and I like start feeling like, oh my gosh, I love the sensation. Oh my gosh, this feels so sexy. Then I can dive deeper in a way that feels almost safe.
Hmm.
that feels like, okay, I'm getting introduced to concepts and feelings that I probably wouldn't have like experienced or ran across like in my own personal life in a way that felt maybe like safe or comfortable for me. Like it's for me, it's like the same way of like, okay, if I want to treat someone to a Filipino restaurant, would I bring them to like my mom's like insanely like super localized cooking, or would they kind of start with a fusion restaurant? I would want them to feel comfortable, like kind of straddling that middle like guard. Like I don't like I for me, like I feel like when people kind of gatekeep it, I'm kind of like, well, that beats the point.
Mm.
Well, I wouldn't say we necessarily want to normalize it, but we what we want to learn is to learn how to appreciate things that are different from us.
Right. I like that perspective because there is a lot of sex workers that feel hurt or annoyed that that Anora was made or that brands are adopting like BDSM, latex, stuff like that. But I like that you said it's just more chances to talk about.
Because someone up there said it was okay.
Hmm.
And that person said it was okay because they're seeing the tides of people's opinions change.
Hmm.
And, I think it'd be ludicrous to assume that someone should just go balls to the wall, like full, like St. Andrew's cross, Shibari. Like, it's just not going to happen in a way that's like generalized for the public. Obviously, like when you niche down, you're going to start seeing more of that. But I think what's cool now is seeing its representation in all, which is creating more and more radical acceptance.
Hmm. So you don't, if a brand were to do like a Shibari show or, full, like something that is clearly derived from sex workers, but they didn't contract any sex workers to consult or like no sex workers were being paid for it, would you still think that that's okay, or would you have qualms about that?
I would definitely would like to make sure that we're involved in some way because it's from us culturally. Like I would also like kind of want to see the intention. Like, is it meant to just kind of be the punchline to a joke, or is it meant to kind of like celebrate the artistry of like Shibari, like, or is it just to like I also feel like a lot of what we create, like, same thing as like Catholicism. Like I think the aesthetics of like Christianity is sexy. I am not a Christian, but
Mhm.
you will definitely see me like in a cross or in a sexy nun outfit. I feel like the ways people want to express themselves in a way that makes them feel sexy is cool, regardless of like the story they give themselves.
Yeah, you kind of already answered this, but do you feel ever pressure to sanitize yourself to be brand safe?
I mean, there's ways that like I know how to present myself in just different situations. Like, okay, like if I went to a business meeting, maybe I wouldn't wear like a micro bikini. Like I would probably wear like a shirt. I would say like I don't necessarily feel like I have to prove myself or like validate myself because in my mind, if I'm in the same room as you, you should know that I'm intelligent and like worthy of dignity. But I will say that I do, especially with men specifically in like in like positions of power. I do make sure to just clean it up. Like I'm not as flirtatious or like as lascivious looking, not because I fear like being taken less seriously, but because I don't want to distract them. Like it doesn't like I went to a crypto conference in Singapore like a month ago and the first day I made the mistake of just dressing how I normally dress and just like not really knowing the language of the people. Obviously when you go into crypto, everyone has their own jargon, the way they dress, the way they communicate, like their community has their own set of rules and boundaries. And I felt like it was just learning how to adjust to it. I could still remain myself, but I knew that I had to talk differently. I had to slightly dress differently so that way that they could receive me with more open arms.
Okay, so I want to talk about your course for a little bit because I love that you made a course. I have a course as well that's all about like personal
Hey.
branding. You're teaching the business of sex work. Do you feel like you're demystifying it by doing that, by putting it in the category of business, or are you kind of creating an entire new mythology around success?
I would say the cool part of OnlyFans is all the fun stuff that you see, the output, right? But the 99.9% of it is customer service, marketing, sales, pretty boring stuff that I actually hate. But those are the things that kind of like drive like someone between making a little money or a lot of money, right? That's the same reason why someone who's a TikToker or an influencer could make just as much money as me and are not showing anything, right? Because they understand the language of the people, which is social media. So Kazumi's University, for me specifically, was created because for all the talk people have about how much money a girl on OnlyFans makes, there's no one talking about how besides like shilling you an agency. And while I'm part of an agency right now, and I also like love some agencies, most agencies are super predatory. They're like moments of opportunity from dudes who want to become digital pimps. And I think regardless, people should learn how to empower themselves and learn how to make their own money and know how to run their own page before handing it off to anyone else. So I feel like knowledge is power, and when you create a course that kind of breaks it down in a way that treats it like like a real legitimate business, which it is, then people start And in a way, demystifying it and seeing like, okay, it's not like I just show up and be sexy. I have to like learn how like posting schedule. Have to learn the semantics and the language of this of the way I would do this. I would have to kind of track my conversion funnels and see where I'm bottlenecking. Like those are things that are important. Those are things that I would say the common sex worker kind of lacks, which is that actual like business mentality.
After watching some of your students trying to replicate your model, what have you learned so far from the reception of it?
To be honest, I feel like it could be a lot better. Like I feel like I had like a sales team that was helping me, like for like the year, I would say Kazumi University KU is about to be a year old starting Christmas. And I would say I'm restructuring the program kind of completely, which is why I've kind of slowed down on like promoting it constantly. I think it's a little more difficult to digest right now. So I want to find a way to number one, make it more concise and easier to understand and replicate. And number two, I want to create systems that make it easier to track your success and also just have more check-ins with like my students. And something I realized, especially like doing like multiple coaching calls, was like realizing that, I could tell you 2 + 2 = 4 and how to multiply, how to divide, how to do everything. But if you don't have the right mental, then you're gonna go nowhere. And I always tell my students, like, look, if you can make it out of your mind, you can make it anywhere. If you're not going to be disciplined, discipline is freedom. The more disciplined you are, the more free you become. If you aren't going to decide that you deserve the life that you want, it's never going to happen. For a lot of them, it's like really unlearning, like, you create unlearning the notion that, a lot of us don't deserve the life that we want.
How do you justify the budget of like a billboard or New York Fashion Week or even like a going on a trip to Thailand just for fun? Do you see it always as reinvestment or sometimes do you see it as like gambling or a ritual or
Definitely gambling. Like I would say, like I did that little OnlyFans banner of the airplane stunt like maybe 4 or 5 times before it actually made sense. The billboard, I didn't really see a huge spike in my income, but what I did see with stunts like that was seeing the ROI over time, the legacy it built, the impact it had on my own community. I didn't feel myself go viral, but what I did feel was like, it's been like 3, 4 years since I did that stunt, and people still talk about it, and they say like, oh my God, you're a marketing genius. I just felt like I was just blowing a lot of money. First year or two, I felt like I was just, gambling a lot of my money and not making it back. Now I see the impact. Like now that I've seen like, okay, when I see another girl do a billboard or do another OnlyFans banner or do another like little LED truck, I'm like, wow, maybe someone saw it, who saw it, who saw it, who saw it. We are like recalibrating the game in which we go viral and make people talk about us.
Mhm.
What we're doing is simply an extension of the fact that people like that systems like Instagram and most social medias shadow ban and delete us. If they would let us be normal, then we would just exist. The reason why we are able to go, we're trying to go guerrilla marketing or like doing things like Bop House is because we have to find ways to continually exist and evolve within the constraints of the algorithm. And we are only as good as what the algorithm is now. Like, when I first started, I was like, okay, Instagram really promotes shareability. So I have to make memes because people don't want to share a picture of a hot girl. They want to share memes to their friends. And then, Meta changed it to Reels because they wanted short form content. So now I started doing podcasts and started clipping me saying viral stuff. So it's all just like a microcosm, micro adjustments of what we need to live. When people complain and say, "Oh, sex is everywhere, porn is everywhere," I'm like, "Well, what did you want us to do? It's not like we die. Like we have to exist somewhere and make a living for ourselves. And if that means that we have to wear a different hat and now have to dance like a little monkey on TikTok, then so be it."
hmm Yeah, it's immeasurable ROI. I always talk about that in my course. Like you don't know, you can't necessarily quantify like this invest equaled this amount of money or this amount of new followers, but it did create all of these conversations happening in the zeitgeist that is going to last a lifetime of your career. And I always say one is the worst sample size. So you can't necessarily say, "Oh, I blew 100 grand on a billboard," but you only did one billboard. So, and even five is pretty small to know if it's successful or not. But yeah, I think you have a really good attitude about. And then also like the billboard thing, it's just further like you are really a pioneer in you as is a business. Like the self is a business. I really commend you for that because that's really hard for people to like have that click. A personal brand is a little bit of an oxymoron because like personhood is different from a brand, is different from a company. But I teach like it's kind of all it can be in one if you can get past this like capitalistic dread and weird feelings of selling yourself. And if you can realize that everyone is selling a part of themselves.
Whenever I do like a one-on-one audit with my students, a big thing for them is like, okay, I don't want to just like seem like this type of fit person on social media. Like, and really what it means is they just don't want to do a TikTok, which I totally understand. I hate it. I think it's super cringe. And I always just say like, what is the price of your pride? And a lot of them are
Mhm.
like, well, like I mean, I could show you as many pictures of me in Tahiti as you want, but it's like a lot of things I did back then were probably really embarrassing. But I don't think about them. And like the price of people's opinions does not pay my rent. When we think about our personal brand, like one of my favorite things I ever read was by Bobby Hundreds. It's called It's Not Just a T-shirt. And there's this really cool moment, like the opening, like intro, where he talks about like how he's at a funeral of this kid and he like loved skateboarding and he was buried in his Hundreds t-shirt, which is like the Bobby Hundreds brand. And the whole title of the book was like, It's Not Just a T-shirt. And that's the thing. It's not just a porno. It's not just Kazumi. It's like what we're doing is we're representing something that's bigger than the microcosm of the conversation we're having. What we're doing represents like a thought process. What we're doing represents community. And when we do that, it's that's when you become larger than yourself.
If you were hit by a bus tomorrow, would Kazumi keep earning, keep speaking through the infrastructure that you've built?
Wow, that's a cool question.
I got it
You
from
know,
Shark Tank. That's what Kevin O'Leary always asks. He's like, "What happens if you get hit by a bus?"
yeah, like what lives on, I would say
Yeah.
like a lot of it, the impact is there. I would say I take credit for anything because obviously like I was just like a character in the multiverse of a lot of characters in like a burgeoning society where OnlyFans is becoming a big deal. But I would say like a lot of porn stars especially come up to me and say like, you've changed the game completely. Like a lot of us no longer have agents. A lot of us no longer depend on bookings. A lot of us now know like, okay, if we want to create money, we do have to focus on our social media. Back then, if you wanted to become a Riley Reid, you were at the mercy of studios. The same way like an actor is at the mercy of their next booking, or like the musician is, at the mercy of their next big hit. You don't actually have the control you think you do until you can say you own it. And it's been cool to see people like for the longest I didn't do anal, the longest I didn't do gangbangs or anything. I was able to do every single like, goalpost of mine at my own pace. And I think I see a lot more sex workers doing that. And although I would say there are consequences, like number one, I think we're making like the worst porn in the world right now for a lot of us. And we're probably like, doing a lot more like Charlie Chaplin formula algorithms that maybe are just like super goon slop. But what is cool is that we're taking it upon ourselves to take that initiative. We're no longer waiting for the opportunity, we create it.
Yeah, not waiting around for the phone to. Do you think true freedom lies in scaling the self or in knowing when to walk away from the.
Wow, that is such an insane question. Oh, wait, could you repeat that? I need to think about it.
Yes. Do you think true freedom lies in scaling or in knowing when to walk away from the performance?
I think true freedom is you stop when you're proud. You stop when you feel like you've created the life that you want to live and it's self-running oiled machine. When you can like look at your life and you can decide I have everything I need and most of what I want. Okay, maybe my life isn't completely perfect right now, but everything I want is something within my grasp that I know how to do or I know how to get. It's just up to me and knowing that my disciplines are already there. I would say this year I joke to my friends all the time, like I think I fucking fell off. All I did this year was travel and do nothing really. Like, and I feel like for a lot of my friends, they're shocked and they're like, no, you didn't fall off. And I'm like, well, I didn't do anything. I plateaued, but I didn't really like, make waves the way I did my first year or two, which I always, in a way compare myself to. But really, like, what it is like the freedom of self is deciding that like what I needed this year was that mental break and really finding myself and like kind of coming back to like what's important to me now. When Kazumi first started, she was 23. And now I'm 28 and my needs are different and what I want is different and like the way I like hold and carry myself and my friends are completely different. So, when I was 23, like I thought like I would work forever because at the time that was exciting for me and my goals were very, very intense. Now that I have a lot of what I want, last year I was really stuck on being like, I want to be an entertainer. I want to prove to everyone that someone like me can, speak at a college and also be on Forbes, which has happened, BT dubs.
Mhm.
But now this year, it's more so like I don't want to feel like I have to prove myself. Like it's more like I will do something if I want to and if it allows me to. But if I feel like, okay, there's like the tomato throwing festival in Italy, I have to go to that. And I'm starting to, for me, like what's more important is just kind of like making sure that my system is there so I can continue doing stuff
Yeah.
like
Yeah, I
like
mean, it sounds like you're at a point where you can do whatever you want and you're going towards that, which is true freedom to me. And speaking quickly about like you hit it big the first year. That happens a lot in music. Like Halsey, first debut song or album, like went in the billions. And so a lot of the time in the music industry, when that happens, when you hit it big on the first roll, you get shelved because nothing is ever going to be able to top that. But when you actually look at Kazumi or Halsey or whatever, it's still like such a profitable, amazing business. And it's just these infrastructures and these systems that are comparing the first year. But it's like you can't really do that because it's like even if it's flopping in your flop era, it's still like infinitely more successful and profit. Like it's really hard to have like a company that is profitable every year. Like even Apple has really bad down years. So even if it's not growing and growing and growing each year, it's a success story. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I would say like I used to be so stuck on like damn, like my first year and two was so epic and like everyone talked about me. I couldn't walk down the street and now it's like I'm seeing it fade away. Like I could just walk down the street, nothing happens. And it's like, I wish I really like reveled in that like those like 5 minutes of fame. I
Mm,
remember a friend of mine the first year, like they always had this warning, like, you're only gonna be famous for a year. You're only gonna be famous for a year. And not to say that I ever was truly famous. But like it kind of like held true for me in realizing like number one, stay humble, stay kind, don't get comfortable, make sure that your money moves, especially are responsible. But it was also just kind of like, at some point you're not gonna always want to do this, which was like just I was so loud and obnoxious like my first few years. And I did not care what anyone thought. And I would say like I wouldn't say I care a little bit more, but now it's like, like my patience and my tolerance for putting myself in like weird situations to get from point A to point B are just much lower than it used to be.
yeah. Your fame hasn't even begun yet. If because to me, you haven't really permeated like the female audience as hard as you can hit it. And I think you're starting to, but I think if you just go down more and more that path, even with your course like you're doing and like going into the fashion world, like your 5 minutes of fame hasn't have not even started. Okay, well, it was so amazing to meet you. You're like incredibly smart, obviously.
Thank you so much for making the call and like
Of
making my
course.
time.
Of course.